I'm Siena. I'm the kid.
I'm Sarah. I'm the mom.
This is Queer Kid Straight Mom.
Let's talk. Welcome back to Queer Kids Straight Mom. I apologize. I am fighting a cold, so I sound a little croaky, as Siena put it. Today, we're talking about the movie Wicked, Part 1. Hopefully, some of you have seen it, so you'll have some context for what we're talking about.
Surely everyone has seen it by this point.
I just saw it last night. No judgment if you have only recently or have not yet seen it.
I'm judging you. Go see it. It's good. It's entertaining.
It is good. So why are we talking about this on our show?
Well, first of all, because gay people love Wicked. And so second, because I was like, oh yes, gay people love Wicked because I don't know, it's like musical theater or whatever. Yeah, sure. And then I actually went and saw Wicked because I had never seen it, or I don't think I'd ever listened to the entire soundtrack all the way through. Like I had read the plot summary and I listened to a lot of the music. But anyway, then I went and watched the movie in the theater. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is like very queer on several levels.
So beyond the musical theater piece, singing and dancing and all of those stereotypical things, what made you have that reaction?
Oh, well, first of all, everybody in it is gay. Cynthia Erivo, Jonathan Bailey. I think the actress who I don't remember her name, but the actress who plays Elphaba's sister, Nessa Rose. I don't know, supposedly Michelle Yeoh and Jeff Goldblum are like gay icons or something, not because they're actually gay, but because gay people love them, I guess. Anyway, yeah, there's a lot of queer people in the musical. And then also the relationship between Elphaba and Glinda, it's not explicitly queer in the musical, but it's set up a lot like a classic musical romantic arc. If you look at the way that the story is structured, the way the songs are structured, it's very much designed to come across that way. It's sort of riffing on that structure. The author of the book upon which Wicked the Musical is based, Gregory Maguire, has said that he deliberately wrote their relationship as having kind of a lot of romantic and sexual tension. From an aesthetic perspective, I think there's a lot of queerness. Like every single person in the entire movie is in love with Jonathan Bailey's character Fiyero, like regardless of gender, everybody's in love with him. There's some costuming details as well. And then also there's just the way that like the story is set up, right? It's a story about a group of people being oppressed and scapegoated by the government in order to maintain power, which I think is just a theme that resonates with queer people.
Could see that. So I was wondering too, there are the connections we can obviously make to our current world. A leader who is a fraud, who has to maintain this mirage, basically, to keep everybody loyal to him. And like you said, the group of people being scapegoated, like when he says to maintain control, give people an enemy.
Well, something along the lines of back where I come from, that being a reference to the wizard coming from
Kansas.
Yeah.
Or no, was it Nebraska?
Oh, I don't know.
Anyway.
Somewhere no one wants to live. Sorry if we have any Kansas and or Nebraska listeners, but I would not want to live in Kansas and or Nebraska. Anyway, back where I come from, the best way to bring people together is to give them a real good enemy.
Yeah, that's the line. So we can obviously see some parallels there. And something very powerful, I thought, was because I had not read the book or seen the musical, and I really didn't know much of anything about the story. The moment when you realize that the person that we have always been told was the villain might be the good guy in the story, that's just a lot of it feeling relevant to these times. But another thing that I noticed as I was thinking about, okay, Siena wanted to talk about this movie on our show. I can definitely see that sort of interaction between Linda and Elphaba. But I also was wondering, and I'm just going to talk about what happens at the end of it because I know a lot of people have seen it.
Yeah, this is not a spoiler-free show. And honestly, the musical's been running for 20 years and the book was published 30 years before that. So yeah, it's not spoiler-free. It's fine.
So when Elphaba hears the plan that the Wizard of Oz has, to use her magic to keep power, and says, no, I don't want any part of that. And Glinda, and they are, friends at this point, is saying, no, you just need to listen to them. Like, what are you doing? You're being crazy. Be respectful. Hear them out. And Elphaba is like, I see where this is going. No, I don't want any part of this, and wants Glinda to come with her. But she ultimately is too scared to go. This is the order of things that she has always known. And the idea of leaving it behind and
Getting called a terrorist by the entire government.
yeah, it's just not something she is willing to sign on for. I was thinking about this as an allegory for queerness as well. If they're developing this relationship and let's say, potentially like falling in love with each other or whatever, there's this moment where, say Elphaba knows this about herself already, and Glinda is sort of taken like, oh, I have these feelings toward this relationship and this person, but this is not something I ever expected to find myself in. And it is just too scary to make that public and go with her.
Mm.
I cannot break free of the state of things as I have always known them.
She is not yet prepared to defy gravity.
Right. So I thought that also, and maybe that is one of the things that you were thinking about when you said that.
Yeah, I think that's certainly an interpretation that is very much, available textually. I mean, the funny thing is for me, I actually, and I think this probably will change somewhat based on my knowledge of the second act, I ended up really, really, really hating Glinda a lot more than I expected to. Because I think an alternative reading, one in which Glinda's actions are not necessarily an allegory for queerness, but rather it can be seen as a kind of like the Oz equivalent of white feminism, where there's this scene where after their goat professor, Dr. Dillamond, gets like fired and arrested, she is like, in honor of Dr. Dillamond, I am changing my name from Galinda to Glinda, which I just think is the absolute perfect encapsulation of the sort of white feminism that people complain about, right? The like everything after the election where people were like, "Oh, I'm going to wear a blue friendship bracelet to show that I'm safe or whatever." And it's like it's a symbolic action that has no meaning behind it, right? Posting a black square on Instagram, sharing like, oh, yeah, all of these things that people are trying to perform allyship without actually having to put any part of themselves on the line. And we see that when it comes to Glinda actually having to risk something, she's not willing to do it, even for her best friend, someone she might be in love with, also, the rights of all of the animals in Oz. Like, she is not willing to sacrifice anything when it really comes down to it. And so I found her an incredibly unlikable character.
And Dad and I were talking about this, that there's so many things that you could sort of read as 50s housewife-ish about her too, which, you can do a lot with that as well.
Yeah, although I almost think that's unfair because, 50s housewives were also in a position of, like not having any social power. And she does have social power. She has so much social power.
But like, think about I'm thinking of some of the characters you see who, have black servants, maids or whatever, that are like, we have to treat these people better. They're like part of our family.
Yeah, no,
that kind of thing.
That's very true. And it's interesting. There's obviously, I think it's great. Like Cynthia Erivo is so talented.
Oh yeah.
My reaction when I saw that there was a Wicked movie being made is I was like, who's gonna like hold up to Idina Menzel's performance, because Idina Menzel is incredible, and like Cynthia Erivo absolutely does, right? Yeah. Like, and she's like great acting, great everything, and it's really cool to see a version of Elphaba who has some of these black coded elements to her, right? Like wearing micro braids the entire movie. It is interesting because it also adds another dimension to the way that she's socially ostracized that I think actually in some ways can impact the message of the movie that isn't necessarily what's intended, right? Because it goes, Elphaba's character is not part of an oppressed class. It's more like a kid gets made fun of because they have red hair or something, right? She's not excluded from positions of power within society, right? Madame Morrible and the wizard are both like, yes, absolutely, you can have power. Absolutely, go for it as long as you help us. Really, the main reason that she gets treated so badly at school at first is because Glinda turns the entire school against her. There's not like a group of oppressed green people in Oz. So there's not a systemic layer to it. And when you have a Black actress playing Elphaba, I think it shifts that slightly, right? Where suddenly you look at Elphaba and you're like, this is not just a character who's getting made fun of. There's also a racially coded element of this, which is interesting because to me, a big chunk of Elphaba's story is that, yes, she's someone who has been treated badly and discriminated against, but she doesn't face the same social oppression that and structural oppression that the animals do. And so her willingness to put herself or put the animals before herself when she's finally kind of given everything she wants is an example of allyship, right? And so there's just an interesting dynamic there, I guess, when you add the lens of, her being portrayed by a Black actress.
Yeah. I mean, I do think, obviously, like, if you take it really literally, it's skin color. But no, she doesn't come from a class of people, a group of people that's ostracized. But I mean, there have been lots of circumstances where people of color have come from wealthy backgrounds or places where their families are socially accepted. I still feel like it could be relevant to skin color as well.
I just feel that that's a little bit of a juvenile reading to be like, oh, she's green, therefore it must be a story about skin color. It's an individual level trait, right? It's haha, you wear glasses, haha, you have curly hair, haha, you have red hair. She's not facing the systemic barriers that people of color in our world face. Like most of the obstacles in her life, the reason, for instance, that she's so, eager for approval from Madame Morrible and the wizard, who kind of she initially sees as like these parental figures, is not because of, systemic discrimination, but rather because her dad's a terrible person who judged his daughter because she was green.
Yeah. That's true. I guess in the absence of a society of green-skinned people somewhere in the movie that everybody looks down on.
Exactly. Yeah, that's sort of what I'm getting at. And the group that's filling that role is the animals, right? And Elphaba making the choice to support them, not because they are a fellow oppressed class, but because she's an empathetic person who knows that it's the right thing to do. Those are two kind of different dynamics.
Yeah, that could make sense. There are a lot of things in this movie that you can see might make, there's been some conservative reaction to it of like, oh, there's all this evil and sorcery, and which I'm not really totally following, but I guess I can see how that whole concept of the villain not being the villain, I could see how that twist could make some people uncomfortable.
Well, and the fact that she was portrayed as a villain specifically for helping a marginalized group of people who were systematically oppressed.
Right.
I mean, you can't really say that it's an apolitical piece. I mean, we've already discussed how no media is apolitical, but you can't argue that there's nothing trying to be political, because it is. It's a deliberately political piece of media that's trying to make a statement.
But when was the book written?
1995.
Okay. Was the book meant to be political?
I mean, I think so, and I have not read the book, full disclosure. But from everything I've seen about the book, I think the book is more overtly political. It has some more adult themes. Incidentally, there's also a large group of people who have read the book who believe that Elphaba is meant to be an intersex character, because apparently there are a bunch of lines in the book referencing like, oh, no one could tell if she was a boy or a girl when she was born. Oh, people are like discussing whether or not she's actually secretly a man, like all sorts of references throughout the book to her, being androgynous or her sex characteristics being ambiguous. So that's another interesting bit in there. But yes, I think the book is even more overtly political.
It's also interesting and feels sort of relevant to what we're seeing today, that these animals had always been a part of society, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was like accepted that they were part of society and they can talk and they're just as smart. And it was through a decision, basically, conscientiously, to like turn these people into a scapegoat, turn these people into the enemy, that people started to hate them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is also really interesting when you look at the history of gay people, transgender people.
Yeah, I mean, I think the author has also mentioned that it was in part inspired by the AIDS epidemic.
Mm,
Yeah, it's just very, very, I think, prescient. Like, one of the major things is that also they're trying to come up with a way of preventing animals from speaking. And, you can sort of imagine what the next step after that is. Oh, well, animals can't speak, therefore they're inherently inferior. Therefore, there's a justification for treating them badly. Like you create all of these problems for a community. And then you turn around and say, look, these problems are evidence of why they're inherently inferior.
yeah. Yeah, there's a lot, definitely a lot to take away from this. And like I said, possibly plenty of reasons there for people to be uncomfortable with it.
I also want to talk about Fiero's character and why I love him and why I think he should be a model for all men. So he starts off like this very like, oh, ha ha, spoiled prince, has no thoughts in his head. Spoiler alert, he also literally becomes the scarecrow. So that's a little bit of foreshadowing right there. Mom did not know this.
I did not
Her
know
mind is
this.
blown.
Okay.
Yeah, foreshadowing, like, oh, no thoughts in his head, etc. If I only had a brain, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, yeah. And then throughout the movie, we see, Elphaba is just totally not impressed by him, like, whatever. But because he and Glinda are dating, they're kind of spending all this time together. And they're like this unit of three people who goes around and does stuff together. And then the kind of turning point in their relationship is when in the course of the goat professor, Dr. Dillamond, getting arrested, the new history professor comes in and is like, yes, look at this amazing innovation we've come up with. And it's a cage, and there's a baby lion in the cage. And Elphaba's like, well, we have to do something. And then she like magically puts everybody to sleep with poppies. Haha, more foreshadowing there. Then she's kind of like, whoa, what just happened? And then Fiero is just immediately like, okay, well, we're going to go rescue the lion cub. And I just think that is amazing. Like crucially, it's not this sort of dynamic of, oh, I think this girl's hot, so I'm going to do what she wants. Because I didn't really read it as they're kind of being a romantic connection between them until after this scene.
Mm-hmm.
He's just like, maybe he wouldn't have done anything if Elphaba hadn't created the opportunity by putting everyone to sleep. But as soon as he sees the opportunity, he's like, yes, we're going to do something about this. And then, once we see at the end of the movie, everybody kind of turning on Elphaba, she's a terrorist, she's an evil witch, etc. He's immediately just like, jump on my horse and ride to the rescue. I just really like that as a love interest. I think there's a different dynamic between them in the book, but in the musical, I think he's a great love interest and all men should be more like him.
That's fair. And sing and dance.
Yeah. And not be offended by men being in love with you.
Yeah, because I mean, really, he like encourages that as much as anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
He just wants everybody to be in love with him.
Which brings me to the sort of aesthetic queerness of this movie. Because we have these underlying themes, but I think the creators of the movie also really embraced it in just the way that the movie was created from an artistic angle. Obviously, we have, everybody, regardless of gender, being in love with him, which is cool. But I also noticed, and I noticed this particularly in his kind of first big musical number, Dancing Through Life, where he's talking about how he has no concerns and he's dancing through life and it's great, that there are actually three different uniforms that the students at the university are wearing. There's one with pants, one with a skirt, and then there's one that's like a pants skirt hybrid. And people of all genders are just like wearing all those various uniforms kind of interchangeably. You know, there are men wearing skirts throughout the film. And yeah, it's just very woven into, it seems like, the artistic direction of the movie, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah. I'm having a really hard time moving past the scarecrow thing. I'm sorry. Oh, and when you said something about foreshadowing, I have seen a couple of people saying, like, okay, a lot of people really need to learn the difference between an Easter egg and foreshadowing.
I know. I saw a whole thing that was like, oh, look at all of these Easter eggs that you might have missed in Wicked. And I was like, okay, first of all, who missed these? Because it's like the thing with the poppies.
Not
That's not an Easter egg. That's like a significant plot point. Did I say A or one?
I'm not sure.
B/2. Yeah, it's foreshadowing. Stuff happens with this later. Not like the slippers, right? People are like, oh, look, it's an Easter egg because he gives her slippers. No, that's a major plot point.
You definitely feel like you need to go back and like watch it again though to like pick up on things.
I have a question because I think I did read the original Wizard of Oz at one point when I was like a small child. And because I saw someone recently pointing out that like in the original book, it's very obvious that the wizard is a fraud. Like it's very explicit, like more so than in the movie, because the movie doesn't have that. Because this is one of I remember when I went and watched the movie as a little kid, I was like, wait a minute, the Emerald City isn't actually supposed to be emerald. Because in the book, he like everybody has to put on these glasses that makes them see everything as being green, but it's not actually green.
Yeah.
But I'm having a hard time remembering how in both the book and the movie, I guess, how they go from, wow, you're a giant fraud and a liar who's been misleading everybody and pretending the city is green, to, yes, we all get our wishes and now we go home happy, happy.
Yeah, and that was one of the things I was thinking about, but I don't remember exactly how it happens. I just remember that like they figure out that he's a fraud and it's okay. It's like he's a well-intentioned fraud or something. I don't know. Maybe they don't all, I can't remember. Maybe she doesn't tell them. Like she finds out, but maybe everybody else doesn't know because he just like gets in his hot air balloon and leaves. Maybe before they all find out.
I don't know.
Yeah.
No recollection.
I don't know. I think we have to revisit The Wizard of Oz. So I'm not sure. But I do remember that like it didn't feel like what a horrible person in The Wizard of Oz. But clearly in Wicked, it is presented as he's not just a fraud, but it's like nefarious.
Which, I mean, in fairness, if you're willing to lie to a whole bunch of people to the extent that you make them wear green glasses in your city just to hold on to power, like, why is he so desperate to be in power? What's that all about? Never trust a man that desperate to be in power.
Well, that's a good point. We can see some good examples of that in our lives today. Yeah, I think it's like, wasn't he like a circus? He came from a fair or something.
Well,
like maybe he was one of those carny type people that like their careers tricking people.
Because then we get into that what's that other movie called? The one that is like a prequel, but the one that's about the man, and then he like shows up to Oz, and then that and Wicked can't really coexist, because in that one, the whole thing is like, oh, he's a heartbreaker and he breaks the Wicked Witch's heart, and that's how she becomes the Wicked Witch. That doesn't really line up. But yes, in that movie, and I don't know to what extent this is referenced, yes, the idea is that he's like a snake oil salesman, basically.
Which I kind of thought at the beginning of Wicked that that's who that was, that he was going to turn out to be her dad.
Yeah, spoiler alert. Yeah, he is her dad.
Okay. Then I started thinking, like, I thought they laid it on really thick, but then it never really seemed to come up again.
Yeah, that's because there's an entire other...
Because there's part 2.
Half of the movie.
Because he kind of did come across as a snake oil salesman, didn't he?
Yeah, well, there's that. And then there's, him having an entire song about, wow, I feel so paternal towards you.
Yeah. But anyway, that his character does have that sort of, obviously is that sort of trickster.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I guess the real difference is that I guess like the original Wizard of Oz is just kind of sort of like, yeah, look at this charming man who's for some reason taken over this fantasy world. Whereas Wicked is like, but why?
Yeah.
That's not cool. What's that all about?
Yeah. Yep. There's a lot of interesting stuff in there. But it was very good. I agree with you. The first time Cynthia Erivo stopped singing, like the song ended, I felt like I was supposed to start clapping and cheering because she's so incredible.
Yeah.
And I'm not a huge Ariana Grande fan, but she's very talented.
Yeah, I mean, she like obviously her vocal performance is incredible, like the high notes. Oh, interesting note about Wicked is that it's also a major reversal of the classic. The soprano is the main character.
Oh yeah, suppose.
Yeah, like her vocal performance is amazing, and like her comedic timing, everything about her performance, like as a comedic, a sort of bringing that lightheartedness to it.
Yeah,
Like does a great job. I just really hate the character.
yeah. And I don't when I say that, it's not like a talent thing or anything about her personally. I just don't find myself loving her songs usually. But yeah, I was really impressed with her performance.
Side note, also, there's evidently been a lot of coverage of the movie where everyone's like, ah, yes, Ariana Grande, and doesn't even include Cynthia Erivo in like their cover photos, which is stupid. And she is the star, and her vocal performance is amazing, and she deserves all the credit.
Yeah. Well, I guess when one person is the most famous coming into it,
And also happens to be white.
that usually helps too. All right. We recommend that you go see it if you haven't.
And you have an entire year to catch up on the book Wicked and the book Wizard of Oz and the movie Wizard of Oz and the prequel to Wizard of Oz and the sequel to Wizard of Oz.
Yes. And I'm sure there will be much more to talk about after part 2.
Yes.
We are going to take a break for the holidays because there's just a lot going on, kids going back to school and some travel and all of that stuff. So we'll be back in a month. We really, really hope everybody has a good holiday season here and that you have, if not your biological family, a family to spend the holidays with and a good set of friends and a support system. And remember, there are a lot of resources out there if you do have to go home to a place that does not feel safe or welcoming to you. There are a lot of people that you can reach out to. The Trevor Project is always a good place to look for resources. But I hope overall it is filled with much love and laughter and festivity. And we will catch you in 2025.
Bye.
If you found this episode interesting, informative, amusing, please review and follow us on your podcasting platform of choice. Getting those reviews and follows really helps us show up more in the algorithm and be able to reach more people to help them. You can find us on Instagram and Threads at queerkid.straightmom, Blue Sky at qksm.bsky.social, and Facebook at Queer Kid Straight Mom. We are no longer on Twitter.
And if you're feeling especially generous, please consider joining our Patreon by searching Queer Kids Straight Mom. It helps us fund this podcast.